before we start, 1199, the union that's real big in New York.
Yeah.
The president told the governor personally, you have to hook up with Dr. Chris Purnell. So they're trying to get me in contact with him tonight.
Oh, nice.
So just confirm. I'm gonna let you know.
All right, definitely. You can use this. Let them see how you doing it.
Right.
Right. Definitely. So I guess we're gonna start in a hot second. You got all that set up. Oh yeah, we on live. I'm on my live. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happening?
What's happening? I'm good. It's good to be with you tonight.
I always feel honored when I can talk to you because I see you a lot on CNN, on CSNB, all of it except Fox. But I always see you. I'm sure you gave him hell too. But I thought it was important because in these times people are sick from the corona, and it's hitting our culture hard. I know you're on the front line. You run the hospital, and you're the most knowledgeable person I know about the vaccine and anything else that happens in modern medicine. And the information that's been spread, that's been actually steadily available to everybody and the masses has been that the vaccine is not good for us as black people or human beings. And you look at certain things like the cerebral palsy on the face, or you might hear 20 people died in Norway, and it's making it to where the average person from my culture is saying either I'm not taking it or I'm gonna wait. And I just feel like we never get the opportunity to hear information firsthand, because it's like all of a sudden everybody's worried about what's in their medicine, but they've never been worried about it before. And it almost seems like a narrative that's been forced, almost like, the president or the ex-president might be able to overturn an election, that kind of a thing. So I always tend to think when the masses are too smart about something, that's, strategically misleading us. So I just wanted people to be able to hear directly from someone that's knowledgeable about it, especially someone like yourself. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. So can you explain to us? I know you took it.
Let me start. Let me give people some context
Right.
On who I am, right? So I'm Dr. Chris Purnell. I'm a good doctor, MD, and apostle of public health. I am a preventive medicine and public health physician leader. So I study systems and I study conditions, environments in which populations live, in which populations work, function, exist, breathe, and I look at those factors that either contribute or influence positive health outcomes, or those factors that are barriers and create negative health outcomes. So I'm a doctor that focuses on health equity, health justice, and I have to start there because I have to impress upon our community. I have to impress upon black folks, black and brown communities, how important it is to know what's at stake. So this pandemic, you've heard people describe it as a coronavirus pandemic, corona, COVID-19. That just means coronavirus disease 2019 because that's when it was discovered. It's catastrophic. It's unprecedented. I need people to understand that. We have not experienced anything like this before in recent history. And back in March and April, we were the epicenter. We meaning New York and New Jersey, very much California's in the thick of it now. Although some data is suggested that maybe California is starting to come out of it. But we were in the thick of it back in March and April. And I like to tell people, not only did this pandemic land on my state, it landed on my city in North New Jersey, but it landed on me personally, Mrs. Ash. And so I lost my dad on April 13th. To this pandemic. I've since lost two cousins. My cousin who was a postal worker in North New Jersey, Thomas Franklin Boswell, we call him Frankie. Another cousin, William Boswell Jr., lost his life similarly around the same time as Frankie, just before the end of the year. And my sister is what we call a long hauler. So I have to put that out there because it is so important that we put faces and stories to the numbers. We are over 400,000 Americans dead. I want that to resonate. Within the last month, the number of Americans that we've lost is catastrophic. We are losing upwards of 4,000, even 4,400 Americans a day. That is not happening for heart disease. You're not losing that many people to heart disease daily. That's not happening for cancer. You're not losing that many people to cancer daily. And so it is important that our community knows what's at stake. Black people are anywhere from 1.5 to upwards, some statistics say closer to 2 times more likely than white people to die from coronavirus. Yeah. Black people and Latinos, Latinx, Hispanics are more likely to be hospitalized, sometimes at rates 3 times to 5 times more. Not only are we more likely to die and more likely to be hospitalized, we know from studies coming even out of China that people who do recover from coronavirus, almost 75% in one study in particular, still had a lingering health effect up to a year, almost a year later. And so I need to make sure that my people understand that your exposure risk is tied to where you live and is tied to where you work. Not only your exposure risk, but your exposure risk is converted to your infection risk, right? So then you get infected. That risk is higher for you, right? And you can get hospitalized. That risk is higher for you. If you get hospitalized and you're sick or you have a very severe case, you unfortunately could potentially die. That risk is higher for you. If you add up all of those risks, that cumulative risk is far greater than any risk associated with an adverse or negative outcome from the vaccine. And I don't think most people realize that. And I was just having this conversation today and trying to get at, what is driving this wait and see approach. And I hear people's concerns and I hear their fears, right? There is the perception that this science was just discovered. That's not true. And I think it's very important that people understand that. This science, meaning mRNA, messenger RNA, right? We've known about this science for almost 3 to 4 decades. It's within the last 7 to 10 years that we've made significant advances in how to use the technology as well as understanding coronaviruses. It's a family of viruses. So you might have heard of SARS, or you might have heard of MERS. Those were like severe acute respiratory syndrome and the Mediterranean version of that. We learned so much from those 2 outbreaks, which are very similar to what we're going through right now. We learned that if you attack the spike protein, so this thing is a virus and it has a crown all around it, and those are the spike proteins, that if you attack that virus can attach itself to your cells. If that virus can't attach itself to your cells, then it can't get into your cells, right? And so it's very important that people begin to digest that. This is riskier for me than it is for other communities. And that's very much because of systemic racism. That's very much because of pre-existing conditions. That's very much because of the type of jobs we work, not having access to work virtually or work from home, not having appropriate access to PPE, personal protective equipment like masks, and not being able to physically distance in some of our jobs, not being able to physically distance in our homes. It's riskier for us, and that risk is greater than a risk of an adverse outcome associated with a vaccine. So if you know that information, I'm not going to convince you, but if you know that information, I'm very confident that you can use that information along your decision journey. And so that's what I want to help people navigate tonight, and that's what I've been doing, speaking to whomever, to help people navigate the decision journey. Should I get vaccinated? And I'm vaccinated, right? I was one of the first people in the United States to be vaccinated because I was a part of the Moderna trial. And so I've been vaccinated since October. I got my first injection at the end of August 31st, and I got my second injection on October 2nd. And so I can tell you what my experience was to help demystify, to like break it down so people can understand it. The first injection felt like the flu vaccine. If those of you out there have received the flu vaccine, meaning I had pain in my arm, it was sore, it was tender, but I could still go to my job, I could still raise my arm. I got headaches. I got headaches for about 2 to 3 days or so, but not to the point where it wouldn't go away if I took Tylenol, Advil, or Aleve. And then I pretty much recovered and I didn't experience anything differently. The second shot, I got really tired, very, very tired after it. What we call severe fatigue. At the end of the day, I just felt like my body was heavy. I couldn't do anything. And so I rested. By the next day, I was back to my baseline, back to my normal self. So when you get the vaccine, whether you get Pfizer or whether you get Moderna, they're the same type, and I'll describe that for folks in a minute. Those side effects are normal, and those side effects only last 1 to 2 days, and in some persons 3 days. Very rare for it to go beyond 3 days. And so that's how you weigh the risk. The risk of feeling sick for a day or two versus the risk of getting exposed, having to be hospitalized, potentially losing my life, or to be left with a lingering adverse health outcome. And I want to make sure people understand that.
So, I remember we were talking the other day with the commission, and you were also explaining to me that a black woman, a black doctor, was also, in a big part of developing this.
Definitely. I think that's very important. There are two things that I want to focus on around where black people or black and brown people have been involved in the process. And equity is an issue that talks about making sure we remove avoidable barriers to people having the fullness of opportunity. So if it's health equity, the fullness of opportunity of health. So Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, she goes by Dr. Kizzy on Twitter. If you don't follow her. She's on Instagram. She works at NIH, and she was on the team, a part of the leadership of the team that helped to design Moderna's mRNA vaccine. That is something we have to talk about openly, that we are not only at risk for dying from this disease more than others or being hospitalized more than others, but we are on the front lines of creating a solution that's potentially saving the whole world. And so we as a people need to know we weren't locked out of that. And that's very important because in our history, we have been a community that has been historically excluded. What do I mean by that? We've been locked out of opportunity. Not only have we been locked out of opportunity, but we have been victims of medical exploitation or medical experimentation. Whenever I speak, I make sure I invoke the names of those who endured those horrors and those tragedies. I talk about the black enslaved women who were subjected to Dr. Sims, and he did gynecological surgeries on them for practice. I talk about Henrietta Lacks, the black woman in Baltimore, segregated Baltimore, who had metastatic cervical cancer and had tissue sample taken from her womb without her permission, without her knowledge. That tissue sample has gone on to be proliferated all throughout clinical research and is one of the most productive cell lines we've ever encountered and has led to breakthroughs in HIV, to cancer, to you name it. So I talk about those people to say, yeah, I hear your concern. Should I trust academic medicine, healthcare? Should I trust clinical research when they've done things like Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks to my people? And I say you should be vigilant. I say you should exert pressure because science has too often been a tool of white supremacy. But in the same token, what being vigilant is doing the homework. And I did the homework.
Right.
And that's how I discovered Dr. Corbett. And that's how I discovered that the science is the science. No one has manipulated the science. People have tried to downplay the science. People have tried to lie about the science. But the science in and of itself has not been manipulated.
Well, I like what you were saying, because that was definitely one of the apprehensions I had, is hearing about, all the ways that medicine has been manipulated to hurt us.
Right.
And, you're not a person that's going to tell people what they want to hear. You tell people the truth. And, I just don't believe that if you thought this was not healthy, or at least not something that was in our best interest, you would be telling us honestly not to take it. We were talking before, and you were breaking down exactly what's in the vaccine, because it's bugging me out. And, I'm concerned, but, everyone, the mass is concerned about what's in medicine all of a sudden. I've never heard that. You go to a hospital, like, well, what's in that, and when did it get made, and all of this. And I also know that, the conspiracy was being pushed before anyone even knew who was making the vaccine. So for me, I just tend to think that when everybody's talking about something and everybody's too smart, something's not right. But for those that are so smart and intelligent that are like, I don't know what's in it, can you please explain what's in it? Because that's, just so for those that are asking.
No, definitely. And I'm glad you started there because disinformation, that's what you're describing, is real. People are purposefully putting out there conspiracy theories or lying. I have to be very honest. And some of those people were governmental actors. The past president, thankfully he's no longer our president, he was one of the largest sources of disinformation in the globe. And so that really has put our back up against the wall. When I say our back, I'm talking about public health. I'm talking about clinical research. Put our back against the wall because you had so many people telling blatant lies. Oh, yeah, you can take bleach and you get better. Touting drugs that weren't proven to treat it. Oh, it doesn't spread by respiratory droplets. There is no aerosolization or airborne transmission. Oh, masks don't work. Oh, you don't need to wear a mask. That did damage. So that's why I have people ask me, what's in the vaccine? Is HIV in the vaccine? Is a chip in the vaccine? None of those things are true. What's in the vaccine is mRNA, the two to date. Okay, let's focus on those two. Because in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some other candidates that go before the FDA. But right now, what we have are two mRNA vaccines, messenger RNA vaccines. So you, in your human body, you have a cell. You have something called mRNA. Basically, what it is instructions to make a protein. That's what it is. That occurs in your cell. So what the scientists did in the lab, they said, I'm going to make a messenger RNA with instructions to make a particular protein. And the protein that I want the body to make is the spike protein that is very similar to the spike protein. Remember that crown I described on coronavirus? It's not coronavirus, so the mRNA is not infecting you with coronavirus. The mRNA is like a Snapchat message. Gives you quick instructions, gives you a quick blueprint. Your cells read it, and your cells start to make protein. Then your cells get rid of the messenger RNA. That's as simple as what it is. It's actually mind-blowing. It's a game changer. This technology, because it doesn't have to be produced in a host, and what I mean by that is it doesn't have to be grown. The viral proteins don't have to be grown in the lab. The proteins are made inside of the body. All that the lab does is to create the genetic instruction. It doesn't have to be grown in eggs. So eggs are not in it. People have asked me, is it vegan? Can I take it? There are no eggs in this vaccine. It's the mRNA, it's salts, it's sugars, right? And it's something called lipids, fats. And the reason why you need those other components is because mRNA by itself, whether it's what occurs naturally in your body or mRNA that they can make in a lab, is very volatile. It breaks down very quickly. So those other components makes it able to hold shape and to be sturdy and stable. So we put fat around it, right? That fat, and it's important that people understand this, that fat is called polyethylene glycol, okay? That fat may be what's driving the allergic reactions in a very small population of people who are experiencing it, okay? And that is about, you get anaphylaxis, which is very severe allergic reaction when your throat closes up and you can't breathe. That's happening in about 11 people for every 1 million doses. So that's very, very, very rare. But that's what's in mRNA, salts, sugars, and the fat coat called polyethylene glycol. That's what's in both Pfizer and that's what's in both Moderna.
Now, I know you said this, but I want to be clear. So you're not actually shooting corona into a person so they can get sick from it and get the antibodies.
Let me say that again, okay? Because these are questions that I get frequently. There is no chip in the vaccine, and there is no coronavirus in the vaccine. All the vaccine is an instruction code. You put the instruction code in your cells. mRNA makes proteins that either are enzymes, and think about enzymes are those substances that make processes or reactions work in the body, or they build proteins that are a part of cell structure or other parts of the body. So it just tells your body to make all of these proteins. That protein is similar to the spike protein on coronavirus, but it's not coronavirus. It cannot infect you. And as soon after your body makes multiple copies of that protein, the mRNA is gone. It gets degraded. And when your body makes all of these multiple copies of protein, which can't harm you, the body just says there is something that's normally not here. And because it's something that's normally not here, the body mounts an immune response. meaning it forms all of these cells to start to try to fight it, to attack it. So if in the future you get exposed to coronavirus, your body already has memory. It already knows how to fight it. That's why these vaccines are game changers, that in and of themselves. And they're 95% effective. We usually don't have a vaccine that's 95% effective. Think about the flu vaccine. People don't like to take the flu vaccine because they're like, well, is it really going to protect me? The flu vaccine can be anywhere around 60% mark effective. This is 95% effective at preventing coronavirus disease and probably almost 100% effective at preventing severe coronavirus.
So how long does it last?
Very, very good question. So this is what further research and further studies are being done about it. But I can tell you what the science to date that we know is suggesting to us. Let's talk first about what we call natural immunity. Meaning you get coronavirus and you get and you recover. You probably have about 90 days of natural immunity where you could not get reinfected. Reinfection is very rare. I want to emphasize that. But you have about 90 days where it's not possible to be reinfected. So we know, looking at natural immunity, that is at least 90 days, and some data to suggest that it's even longer. We know that these mRNA vaccines are at least mirroring the effect of the immunity of natural coronavirus infections. But then we have data to suggest maybe it lasts a year. Maybe it lasts even longer. We're going to be able to definitively, we in the scientific community, definitively answer that question when we start to do what we call booster shots and studies to evaluate people who got injected a year ago. First injections for Moderna were about March. So we're almost at March. We will be able to, and this happens to me whenever I go in. They draw blood, and in that blood they begin to track my antibodies, right? So they want to see how long those antibodies last. So we're going to be able to have a definitive answer, but it's suggestive that it is at least several months and possibly 1 month. And some people in the research field are speculating even longer. But I'm not going to tell you more than what I know 100%.
Right. So that means that we might potentially have to take a vaccine every year?
Yes. There's a potential.
Wow.
But think about it. Would you want to have to take a vaccine every year or to have the risk of being exposed?
Oh, no, I get it. It's just the new normal.
Right,
yeah.
But that's what I want people to understand. That's what I want people to understand, okay? Like, it's a risk-benefit relationship, right? There's a cost to something and there's a benefit from it. The cost is you have to get this injection. It's a small needle. The cost is you have to get this injection once a year. If it's an mRNA vaccine like the ones we have right now, it's 2 doses. That's the cost. But the benefit is you are protected from coronavirus, which is if you're black, you are 1.5 more times likely to die than if you're white. Which is if you're black, you're 3 times or almost 4 times, and a Latino almost 5 times more likely to get hospitalized. Those are risks I don't want to live with. I want to be protected against those risks. And I want my people to be protected against those risks. I want all people to be protected against those risks. And this is one of the tools, one of the most powerful tools we have to do it.
Well, I'm diabetic, so I really can't even afford to play those games. And that's the reason why off top, I'm a person that needs to go outside and work with other people, but I'm also a person that comes home and I live with other people. So, and a lot of people depend on me. So, if I wasn't taking medicine that was provided by modern medicine, which is insulin every day, I would be like, I can't just, sometimes take modern medicine and, pick and choose. But what I do know is usually when someone's in the hospital and they're sick, they're not asking what's in it. They'll just say, give me whatever you got that's going to make me feel better.
Right. And so, Paul, I just want to say 2 things to that real quickly. I appreciate you always talking about being a type 1 diabetic because it normalizes living with a chronic health condition. I have chronic health conditions. I take multiple pills every day just to function. And I live off of an injection once a month to put vitamin B12 in my body because I don't have the receptors in my gut to absorb vitamin B12. You can't live without vitamin B12, right? And so I know what it's like to live with a chronic health condition. right?
Right.
And because of that, I also know how that makes you susceptible. If you get exposed to an infectious disease,
Right.
you could have a worse outcome. And my father lived with HIV/AIDS. I need people to understand this. My father was a medical miracle, okay? My father was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS in 1997. Think about where we were in treatment protocols with HIV/AIDS in 1997.
Right.
Nowhere where we are today in 2020. My father lived all of those years with what was a certain death sentence because of the advances of medicine. Right? And he would plot out his T cell count, he would plot out his lab results, he would try different medicines when they were first coming to the market because he knew there was a risk benefit profile. And he wanted to live. He wanted to live for his family. He wanted to still be a productive member of society. And if you have chronic health conditions, coronavirus infection is more risky for you. And I need people to understand that. I want you, if you tell me, Doc, you know, I'd rather take the risk, I want to make sure you know what risk you're signing up for.
Right.
Because and I want to make sure you know you don't have to sign up for that risk.
And also, you know, I think the worst part, because at some point we're all going to expire, but in this corona thing, you're alone, you know?
Right.
It seems like the worst way to have to go. And I don't think people realize what that feels like unless they're there. And I'm not trying to feel that pain or even get to that if I can avoid it.
I agree. My dad, the night before my father died, you know, the way I knew that my father was about to die, I actually saw a friend and another medical colleague post on social media. I think she had posted it on Facebook that her father just died in a hospital in New York. And her father had coronavirus. He died in the bathroom. She talks about this a lot. She's been all over social media, and Not Just Another Black Body is a group that she started, Dr. Magdala Sherry. And when I saw that, I said, Yahweh, I need to check on my dad. And so when I called the hospital and they told me, and the nurse sounded like so nonchalant, she was like in the fog of war. She said, oh yeah, he's not doing well. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? I know he's sick, but I just spoke to you all around 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock. He was getting a blood transfusion. What are you talking about? And she's like, he's not doing well. His vitals are dropping. And me being a physician, she's saying things like his blood pressure is 60 over PALP. And I know that's not conducive to life for a very long time. And I'm like, whoa, what are you telling me? What are his respirations? What are the rest of his vitals? And she said, I said, what are you saying? Are you saying my father's dying? And she was like, yeah, like almost nonchalantly. You knew he was going to die. And so I don't want anyone else to have to experience that. So my brother was able to, my brother, the bishop, he was able to go up and see my dad the night before he died. I worked in a hospital 4 miles away, and I didn't make it in time. We don't have to live that way. We don't have to. We have power in our choices and our decisions. We have power in the tools that are before us. We have self-efficacy, the ability to make an informed choice and decision. And as a community, we have collective efficacy. We can say, I'm going to do what keeps my community healthy and whole, right? And that's what I want us to have a dialogue about. What can we do to keep our community healthy and whole? And yeah, I'm all for holding powers accountable. You know that about me. Let's hold powers accountable, whether those are governmental powers, whether those are economic powers, or whether those are medical powers. Let's hold those institutions accountable. Let's say I want to see the science. Let's say I want to interrogate it. I want to investigate it. I want to read it. Let's say I want to make sure you didn't cut any corners. Let's say I want to make sure this was ethical. Let's say I want to make sure there's informed consent. Let's say I want to make sure this is voluntary. That's how we make sense of the black people who were martyred through Tuskegee. That's how we make sense of the black people who were martyred like Henrietta Lacks. That's how we make sense even of the black woman who was just martyred, Dr. Susan Moore, the physician who institutional and systemic racism took her life from her. We got to make sense of that madness. And the way that we make sense of that madness is by being empowered by truth, being empowered to know the science and to say, I'm going to do what keeps me healthy and whole and what keeps the largest amount of my community healthy and whole.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. I was going to open it up to the rest of the commission. And, you know, for people that don't understand what the commission is, it's a group of people that I respect. I consider all of us superheroes, congressmen, bishops, senators, doctors, therapists, you know, school, you know, principals, you know, the OSG. And, you know, I'm lucky enough to be able to have these dialogues with people that are just on the same brain frequency, you know, the same mentality. But I just wanted to ask you this one question. The thing I think that scared my culture, our culture the most, is the thing on the internet where the faces drop, the cerebral palsy. That's how they...
Bell's palsy.
Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah.
That one hurt. Because that got everybody like, nah. And they know, they see it, they don't know where it's from. Right. But whoever put that one out, you know, whether it was...
Let's talk about that. Because look, so when you're a part of a clinical research trial, like I was a part of a clinical research trial, you have to be evaluated to first see if you're healthy enough to be a part of it. So you could be a part of the clinical research trial if you had a chronic health condition. They wanted people with type 1 diabetes. They wanted people with type 2 diabetes, right, high blood pressure, COPD, asthma, sickle cell anemia, HIV. In Moderna, about 17% of the participants had a chronic health condition. About 25% were 65 and older. So you want a very diverse and inclusive participation pool so that you can say, I can generalize this to the larger population. That's why you also needed diversity in these trials. Moderna had about 20% that were Latino, Latinx, Hispanic. You had about 10% that were Black or African American. And Pfizer had a very similar amount, 26 Latino, about 10% Black. When you look at the two arms, placebo, half of the people get placebo, saline, so nothing active, and half of the people get the messenger RNA vaccine. I didn't know. You all knew. I told you when I enrolled, and you know, you're like, which one did you get? I was like, I don't know, because it's blinded. I didn't find out until vaccines were available to people, and it would be unethical to withhold it from me because I work in a hospital. So that's when I got unblinded. So when you have those two arms, one arm placebo, one arm the investigational vaccine, you want to look for anything that happens and to be able to prove that this happened because of the vaccine, or did this happen at the same prevalence or rate that it occurs normally in the population. There were a few cases of Bell's palsy in both the vaccine arm and both the placebo arm. So it happened at a rate that's similar to the general population. It did not happen because of the vaccine. There's nowhere in the data to suggest, and Bell's palsy, for those of you who don't know, is that temporary paralysis with a portion of your face. You can get the facial droop, and you can have Bell's palsy whether or not you get a vaccine. It's just a certain prevalence rate that it occurs. So there was no higher incidence, no higher percentage of Bell's palsy in people who participated in the vaccine trial. That's how we know there is no risk for Bell's palsy because of the vaccine. This is the same way. You could have a stroke and have taken the vaccine. You could have a heart attack.
Right.
Doesn't mean the vaccine caused it. I need people to understand that, because strokes and heart attacks occur at a rate in the general population.
Right. So it would have happened anyway, regardless of somebody was taking the vaccine or not. With that amount of people, got it. So it's probably safe to say that those pictures probably weren't even from somebody taking or anywhere near the vaccine.
You never know. You can alter video. You can put out a little bit of truth surrounded and a lot of bit of lie and scare people, because that's what people want to do. People rightfully have fears and they rightfully have concerns. They rightfully have skepticism. But there are others taking advantage of that.
So I'm going to ask one more question about the room, and I'm going to open the door. I see Dennis from OSG just got in there. I know he has a lot to ask and talk about. So another thing that they were saying is the doctors, is the president, are they taking the same thing that everyone else is taking, and how does someone know that?
Look, I got the Moderna messenger RNA vaccine before the president got it or anybody else. I got it as part of the clinical trial. And I can guarantee that what's being offered, like for instance, to my brother Bishop, who's on here tonight, who's been vaccinated, I think he's the only other person other than myself on tonight that's been vaccinated. We got the same thing. You can look at lot numbers. You can have the distribution of it is being tracked. And so there hasn't been this conspiracy to give people something different based on what your perceived social caste is. Okay. I I didn't even know I was vaccinated until about 3 weeks ago. And when I found that out, I was just amazed because I really was on the front line of discovery.
Right.
I really
You made
was
history.
at the beginning of all that we see happening today. So no, it isn't some grand conspiracy theory to give certain people the active vaccine, to give other people saline. I had the same side effects, and I have to say this, make sure everybody understands this. Side effects are normal. When I talk about adverse reactions like anaphylaxis or Bell's palsy or hives, I'm not describing that. Side effects are things like a headache. Side effects are pain, tenderness, redness, or swelling in the arm or under the arm. Side effects is fever. Side effects is muscle pain, joint pain. Side effects is fatigue, right? Those things are normal because this vaccine, like the flu vaccine, is what we call reactogenic. You know, people say, I got the flu vaccine and it gave me the flu. No, it didn't. It's reactogenic. So you get symptoms from it. You get side effects from it. It means the immune system is working. It's that type of vaccine. It's like when you go to the gym and you work out and you feel it. You didn't hurt yourself. You're just sore because your muscle is contracting and expanding.
Right.
Okay? So it's very clear that people understand that.
So I have a therapist with Taj on. I have Dennis from OSG with the principals. I have your brother, the bishop. I would love to hear their take on this and their questions because they're all freedom fighters, superheroes, people that love others before they love themselves and are actually the people that others look to for information. So I'm curious to know how it's affecting them and what questions they have and what they feel people generally need to know. So I'm opening up the floor for the rest of the commission. Please.
I got a question for you, Doc.
Bishop.
I'm reading the comments, and some of the questions is, who's paying you? Who's paying you, and have you been paid?
Right. Nobody's paying me. I'm doing this.
So were you paid to take the vaccine?
No, I wasn't. Let me say it. Let me define that for people. When you participate in clinical research, you get reimbursed for the time that you spend in the study, right? So they give you access to roughly anywhere from $75 to $100 for participating in clinical research. And you get that per visit, and you get that whether or not you get placebo or whether or not you get vaccine. I got that on a card. I never even spent it. But I'm not being paid by Moderna. I have no stock in Moderna. I'm not being paid by the federal government. I'm not being paid by anybody in healthcare to come on here and to vouch for the vaccine. I'm vouching for the vaccine because I'm a public health physician. And being a public health physician, I know public health science, and I know this science is accurate and truthful, and I know the deadly ramifications of this virus.
And can I just piggyback on that? The reason why you changed my mind about the vaccine because I knew you before any of the COVID, not a long time, but the time I've known you, you've done nothing but tell the truth no matter how it affects people. You tell the unconventional, the inconvenient truth, and I would never have anyone on my platform that I felt was a betrayer of our people, only someone that I feel would tell the truth to our people, which is why I thought it was so important for you to be the person to be telling, because you told, like, I was one of the first people, because when I first heard, like, I'm not taking that. When you took it, I was like, you took it? and even the bishop was like that. We were all like, but then it's like, and it's crazy because some very intelligent people are persuaded by the masses and what the masses are saying. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right because I understand it, but I just wanted to say, if my cosign means anything, you are the greatest actor of all time if you fooled me about the truth, you know, because you've done nothing but be brutally honest, and I've seen you be brutally honest to people, and you're brutally honest. And I think the fact that you take such a side that most don't, taking this side really shows how real you are. Because, you know, it's so convenient for someone that's against the grain to be against this. And for someone like me who's usually against the grain, and I'm saying it like, yo, I'm not saying you're wrong for questioning it just based on history, but I ain't playing. I seen people. I remember you in the hospital.
Yes.
Before the vaccine, like in the very beginning, you couldn't get on our Zooms because you were in the hospital around people from our culture. And I remember you specifically saying this, and I was like, why'd you do it? And you were like, because I'm looking at too many of my people dying. I have to help my people. And you actually took that shot. I saw one of the comments like, how you didn't know you took it. When you get tested, they don't tell you who took it. So they don't tell you till after if you were the person that received the right one and you were one of the ones that did. So I just wanted to be clear about that as well.
They don't want it to influence what you report. They
Right.
don't want to tell you whether or not you got vaccine or whether or not you got saline, because they don't want it to influence what you tell them. When I was enrolled in the study, initially they explained everything to me. I got to look over the data that was published in journals, the data that they knew from the study team about what was rolling out across the successive phases. And I want to say this too, Bishop. I'm very glad you brought that question out, because actually, I have to make it very plain. As a Black woman physician, I'm frequently questioned whether or not my expertise or my knowledge is legit. And I'm not going to run from that. I'm going to hit that nail on the head. I'm frequently questioned whether or not I'm a ploy or the man has propped me up. The man never studied for me. The man didn't take my test. The man didn't put in all of those long nights and those hours. I did that. I did that because of the family I came from, a rich tradition of history of Black power, Black intelligence, Black opportunity. And so I know why our people, why we talk and why we deal with these things of conspiracy because of injustices. But in the same token, I'm a doctor. I'm a real doctor, and I'm a fellow in my field. So saying I've achieved a certain amount of significant contribution to the field. So I take that with integrity. There's a sense of accountability. My word has to be true.
And also, I want to be clear for everyone that's watching. This isn't to say you're wrong or right. This is so you have the proper information before you make your decision. That's all. You know, you're adults. Everyone is an adult. And you started the conversation. Like, I'm not going to tell you to do it. I'm just going to tell you exactly the truth. And, you know, you're leading by example by actually taking it. But no one's pressuring anybody to do anything.
No.
I just want our people to be told by our people. And I think our people should know that there are doctors at this level that are fighting for us on a medical level that can talk to us in our language. And this is the purpose of that. Next commission, please. Everyone else, I see Taj. Therapeutically. Taj, how does this affect the people?
What's up, everybody? Thank you for having me. Hey. So I remember we were having a conversation about this before. And, in this field that both me and the doctor are involved in, we deal in ratios and, significant findings. We look at the numbers and the percentages of things, so I'm glad you touched on that. The thing that I want to acknowledge from a clinical or psychological perspective is we do have to acknowledge the fact that, the things that people are fearing, their anxieties and things like that, this is because of actual things that occurred.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That, and I'm glad that you kind of touched on that a little bit, because we have to validate that and we have to acknowledge that. Anything associated with the system is going to be, it's going to be approached with a lot of hesitant feelings and anxiety, because you're dealing with a system that has implanted things into our community, that has, complicated plans to keep us, oppressed for hundreds and hundreds of years. These are actual facts. So we have to acknowledge those things. And that's why I'm glad that you took it to the science of it, because at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. You know what I mean? My thing is this, though. Because those fears are acknowledged and because they are reality, right, we have to come up with ways that we can be independent of that system, like people in our community, chemists, doctors, things like that we could test these things. Because at the end of the day, this is nothing that we can't put under a microscope ourselves and look at. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you. Let me answer that in two parts that I think is very important to circle back to this. Science has too often been a tool of white supremacy.
Yeah.
I won't run from that statement. I have said that loudly. I've said that on the news. I've written that in press because that's the truth. And that's why we have the level of inequities that we have. That's why we have the level of disparities that we have. That's why Dr. Susan Moore, a black woman physician in Indiana, is dead today.
Right, absolutely. And to your point, not to interrupt you, because you had touched on something earlier that I wanted to acknowledge as well. And that's the fact that you said that we're more predisposed
Right.
to get some of these things, right?
Right.
A lot of the reasons why we're predisposed to get those things is because of the trauma that
Right.
has affected us biologically from them and the oppression that they have put on us. So these are things that we have to validate and we have to go into. It's not something that we can just kind of say, oh, okay, and gloss over it. This is something we have to deal with because at the end of the day, this is what's stopping us from getting the help when it is real.
Let me say it this way. We know for a fact that because of systemic racism, because of implicit bias, black communities, brown communities, their health-seeking behavior is different. You're not going to go to a doctor, even when you need to go to a doctor. If we do go, the doctor doesn't hear you or believe you.
Right.
You're not going to go to a doctor, even if your life is at stake, if you don't trust that the doctor is going to give you the best available medicine. Look, I've been in hospitals where people have threatened to call security on me for asking too many questions. Okay, me, the black woman doctor, been in hospitals, advocating for my family members and my loved ones. Systemic racism, institutional racism, implicit bias is real. And the only way that we're going to be able to deconstruct that, the only way we're going to be able to disrupt and dismantle that is, one, to call it what it is, to speak about it honestly and transparently, and to have blacks and browns in position of power to disrupt and rebuild those systems, right? So the way that blacks have stepped forward, Taj, to say, I don't have a lab where I could make a messenger RNA, but I'm a physician scientist, or I'm an immunologist, or I'm a virologist, and I can look at the published data. I can interpret the science myself. And you have had reputable black groups coming forward to do that. Like, for instance, the National Medical Association, National Medical Association has been in existence for at least 100 years. And that is for black physicians and black physician scientists and other scientists. They were one of the first groups to step forward and to say, I want to look over the data. You had independent scientists. You had scientists across academia, scientists that had no relationship to the federal government. I want to look at the data. I can interpret data.
Right? And that's my whole point. Is that's why I asked that question, because I wanted the groups that are engaging in this to be acknowledged, because these are the things that we have to know about. Because part of holding the system accountable is that we have to do it ourselves. We can't expect the system to hold the system accountable. That's clearly not happening. We have to do it. And in the medical world that we deal with, that means being able to look in that microscope, transcribe those chemicals, how it's reacting, know the different ratios that you explained. I mean, the last question I have for you about the experiment was, you said that the African Americans, who I assume you were talking about the 10%, right? They accounted for 10% of the experiment. Right. What was, you said, the side effects and some of the adverse things that happened. What was it? What was it in proportion to the African American community and Latino?
Same. Right, same. It's very important that you ask that. Two things I want to say again. I want to emphasize, because we don't see these faces, and these faces aren't described enough. There were black physicians and black scientists at the forefront of the discovery that we see happening across all of these different vaccine candidates. I told you about one of them, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, right? I don't want people to devalue or to lessen the intellectual brilliance of that black woman who was a part of that team that designed the messenger RNA. I don't want people to lose sight of that, because that's not a common occurrence, right? I don't want, like, even where I was a part of the trial, one of the co-leads, one of the co-investigators is a black woman scientist who's also working on HIV and working on issues of not just HIV in the general population, but HIV in the incarcerated population. So I don't want people to lose sight that black and brown faces are in positions of power. We just have to have collective power, and we have to have visible power, because otherwise systems also can't be held accountable. okay? And then two, when you have the vaccine trials for the two candidates that are currently approved under emergency use authorization, you look at people by which arm they're in, vaccine arm versus placebo arm. Then you begin to look across each arm and say, did black people in the placebo arm have the same experience as white people in the placebo arm? Did Latinos, did Asians, right? You want to know, did black people in the vaccine arm have the same experience as white people in the vaccine arm? Have the same experience as Latinos in the same arm? There were no differences by race or ethnicity. And I need to emphasize this because I just did a talk with the NIH in George Washington Law School a couple of weeks ago. Race is a social construct. The relevant thing that we need to be talking about is geographic ancestry, because geographic ancestry impacts your genes. Genes are tied to location and environment, right? That are influenced by that location or environment. So either you evolve something that's an adaptive, like people who have risk for malaria, certain genes are protective for them, but they also have increased risk for sickle cell, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so there weren't any biological differences by race, and I didn't expect any biological differences by race. But the most important thing about ethnicity, Taj, was knowing the systems and the environment that you live in. Was this particular drug effective in those environments? You live in crowded, cramped dwellings. You work frontline positions that are also crowded and cramped. You might not have equal access to PPE, personal protective equipment. And if you had the same outcome as someone else because of systemic racism, the job you work, how much money you earn, where you live is rooted in the social construct of race, I need to know that this vaccine was equally effective across all of those scenarios. And it was. Even people who were older. It was actually, and people who were older actually had less side effects, Taj. What we saw with both Moderna and Pfizer, the second dose usually has more side effects. And again, I emphasize this, side effects are normal. Adverse effects are something different. Side effects are headaches, side effects is pain, side effects is fever, side effects is muscle pain, joint pain, fatigue, right? We saw that older people had less side effects. And that's fascinating. That's what they're trying to understand more about what's happening in the bodies of the older person, that they had less side effects. So very good question.
Wow. Salute.
Dennis?
Dr. Chris, how are you?
How are you?
Good
How
to
are
see
you? Good to see you.
Good. Likewise. So, I had a conversation earlier with the OSG family, and I started the conversation by asking their thoughts about, President Biden's pledge to open up schools throughout the country within the next 100 days. And obviously, as a person who understands the situation and how it is affecting Black and brown communities a lot different, is it, in your opinion, possible to open schools in the next 100 days to send our babies back into these schools?
Very good question. Let's answer this in two parts too, because right now in New York City, there are schools that are open. There are schools that are open by hybrid, and we actually have some of those in New Jersey too. And I've said this before, the particular school, what makes it safe or unsafe is the ventilation system in a school. A particular school, what makes it safe or unsafe are the public health measures that are being followed, whether or not people are remaining masked, whether or not you have appropriate safe distancing or physical distancing, and whether or not people are doing hand hygiene. What we've actually found is that schools are less risky than homes. I want that to register with people. That's what we found. What is fueling the current pandemic is people getting together from multiple households in a home. The home is usually a small space, is usually a confined space. The ventilation is not adequate such that the droplets, when they are expelled into the air, they linger and hang there. And people are usually relaxed at home. People usually don't have a mask on at home, and people usually stay at a home longer. So yes, there are risks associated with the schools, but it's actually the homes that are riskier than the schools. So that's why you even see within public health is saying, yes, you can open schools if you satisfy these conditions, if you satisfy this criteria. Part of it is frequent testing. Part of it is the ventilation. Part of it is the safe distancing. Part of it is wearing a mask. Part of it is the hand hygiene. And so what the president is talking about is a plan to get kids safely back into school, because we also know there are risks associated with being home, right? There are certain kids who aren't learning. I think everybody's learning has been impacted, but there are certain kids that it's been more a negative for than others. So that's something I think that needs to be said. In each family, you have to weigh your particular scenario, right? I think parents should be offered a hybrid option. And what I mean by that, they should be offered a option to do virtual school, and for certain kids it is appropriate to be in school, especially kids with special needs, especially kids with English as a second language. There are kids, we know what has spiked during the period of the pandemic, child abuse, sexual assaults, intimate partner violence, because people don't have access or outlet to the resources and the social services that they did pre-pandemic. They have been cut off from that. So this social disconnectedness has been costly for us as well. And it's going to be important to make sure that educators have access to the vaccine. So if you're going to open schools, you can't open schools without giving educators access to it.
That's so good. That's where I wanted to go next. But even with access, right? I mean, going back to some of the things that Taj has mentioned, and you know that I'm still on the fence about it as well, based on our last conversation. If you know, it's an option, you know, and some people are still uncomfortable in doing and accepting the vaccine. So if you don't force teachers to do it, there's still the possibility of young people being infected, because somebody needs to teach them when they go into the building. And obviously the country's not at a space yet where they're mandating teachers to take this vaccination. So with that being said, thinking about the 100-day, there has to be several other criteria in place other than just simply, you know, like ventilation and things like that. Because even in New York, most schools, you may have 20, 30, 40% of the actual population that are in the buildings at one time. And there's still spikes in positive cases and things like that. So,
I'm sorry, but
yeah, no, please. I think you can kind of get the gist of what I was saying anyway. So.
there are definitely, and I want to emphasize this again, there are still spikes in positive cases, but this is where the science matters. This is where surveillance matters. This is where looking at the data. Schools are not driving the outbreaks that we expected. It's households. That's what's driving the outbreaks. And that, I need people to understand, it's the mixing of households that's actually the most dangerous behavior that's fueling the outbreaks. What we're seeing now is, and I believe it was USA Today, a bishop shared it with myself and my family earlier today. We have lost more Americans at this point, I believe, that we lost in World War II. I think we finally crossed that mark. And I want people to sit with that, because it took us almost a year to get to 300,000, but a month to get to 100,000. It is being projected that we will lose another 100,000 people by the middle of February. That is astounding. We are losing people at the rate of 3,000 to 4,400 people a day. That is more than what kills people from heart disease, and that is more than what kills people from cancer. I don't want to misquote the stat, so Bishop, please check it for me, but I believe we're losing like 9 people every minute at this point with the rate of the pandemic. I'll look and confirm.
Yeah, it's very high. And I think what people are not being honest with is that they're more acceptable for a war death than a coronavirus death. And once again, more people have died from coronavirus than World War II. And people, they don't let that resonate. And then I think the other thing is, in my field, I personally know people who have died. I'm not just speaking about my father and my cousins.
Right.
But in my field, I know people who have died of coronavirus. I think it's different if you know somebody who died. And actually, when we look at the stats, at this point, just about every Black or Latino have experienced someone who has died. I don't take, I'm gonna get in trouble with the doc. I don't take the flu shot.
Right about that.
But I did take the vaccine. I took the vaccine, because anyone who lives with a chronic issue, they don't have a problem maintaining. But I deal with so many people, and not everyone has the same value system that I do, and not everyone has the same beliefs that I do. And I love my family, and I lost my dad. But my father having HIV, I was always on the front lines when something new came out. I had to get it for him, you know. So my dad did his own research. But when you are a cancer patient, my dad had cancer. I have other friends who had cancer. There's something called chemo. But when you are faced with life and death, some of us, we love life so much, we're willing to take the risk to be healed, and so forth. But I think within our communities, I think the only thing that's going to bring change, to be honest with you, is that we need more Black and Latino scientists. We need more Black and Latino doctors. We need more people, professionals who are in the field, who experience this on the front line. Because when I listen to these subjects, what hurts me, and what cuts me, is that when you're looking at the Black and brown people dying, white supremacy is not our issue there. Our issue is ourselves. We don't trust one another. I'm reading the comments about you, Doc. I'm reading the comments that you're not a real doctor, that you're a phony, that you're a fake. So within the Black community and the brown community, we have trust issues amongst ourselves. Even when we'll have people respect their field, but not another person's field. And that's one of the problems we have. We'll have people want to be respected as an educator, but not respect you as a doctor. Or people want to be respected as a doctor, but not respecting someone as a scientist. And it's a trust issue. But I believe when you know someone who has died, and I can remember for a long time, quote unquote, young people couldn't get sick. And then we had quite a few young people in our ministry get sick, you know, and so forth. But it's very dear to me because I believe that within our community, we become our own self-enemy. But what will bring change and what's going to take time is having more Black and brown professionals who are on the ground level, who can tell people what is taking place. Because the bottom line is, do people believe your testimony?
Right.
And so.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's why I said that before. As a Black woman physician, I am frequently questioned. When I was studying to become a physician, it was the frequent assumption that I wasn't the doctor when I walked in the room. And Black patients made that assumption just as frequently as white patients. There was the assumption that somehow my comprehension of the material was not as accurate as someone else's comprehension of the material. There was the assumption that someone had to be putting me up to what I'm saying because I didn't have the self-determination or the self-agency to operate in my intellectual skill and power. And that's how blacks have internalized that racism and trauma and perpetuated. And that's what we got to break and disrupt. And you're right. We need more black and brown doctors. And the more black and brown doctors that we have to speak honestly and transparently to what we've experienced. And we have to speak honestly and transparently around the science. So I tell people all the time, people go, how can we build trust in black and brown communities? We're not going to build trust in black and brown communities until we can demonstrate trustworthiness. You are worthy of trust. In a way, a part of demonstrating that trustworthiness is coming before the masses and also not speaking anything other than what the science says. And I love the fact that this same science that I'm speaking is the same science Dr. Fauci is speaking, and the same science that Dr. Kinsey Corbett is speaking, is the same science that the black African scientist I was on with the NIH from Nigeria was speaking, because the science is true. But we have to get to a point in our community where we can begin to measure and weigh the conspiracy. It says, is there anything truly supporting this conspiracy? Then I have a responsibility or an accountability to stopping it.
And we also have to speak facts. Facts says the majority of black and brown people did not support Malcolm X. The fact is the majority of black and brown people did not fight for civil rights. The majority stayed home. The majority saw people fighting for civil rights as troublemakers. We have to remember that when we look at history, it's the minorities in numbers that make a choice. They make the choice that my life is going to make a difference. And then it's in history that everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon afterward. Right now, no one is suffering as much as blacks and Latinos in this murderous virus. No one's suffering at the rate that we are. No one. Not in the jobs, not in the unemployment, not in the risk. No one. We are at the greatest risk. And then we have to battle white supremacy. We have to battle Trump saying some people got better DNA. We have to battle so much. But still, we are carrying the burden when it comes to death. And people have to understand that within our communities, some people already have conditions of high blood pressure and so forth. Catching coronavirus becomes even more deadly for them. So to me, it is all about war. It is all about survival. It is all about having a trustworthy witness, and that will take place by personal relationships. I mean, I personally know people here on this Zoom. So everyone who's listening, you have to listen to those you trust to. You that's the bottom line. You have to. But those of us who have experienced death, it changes you.
I think Bishop, to your point, I mean, all these things that we're talking about, how we look at each other is a symptom of how we look at ourselves. It's a symptom again of the systemic, oppression that we've been victim to. These are symptoms of that. We have to be able to look at ourselves and say, you know what, I can be that doctor. I can be this. I can be that CEO. Just that's what I love about this Zoom. You know what I mean? Like, you can do this. I can do this, and that builds trust within itself. Because this is the thing. You talked about a war. In a war, what you want to do is be able to manipulate the things that are in your control. Okay, there's certain things that we talk about. People can say, "Oh, it's conspiracy theory. Oh, it's this." They can attribute it to all this other things that are subjective. Okay, but when it comes to this science, okay, this is a biological chemical that we're talking about. This is a biological virus that we're talking about. Okay, it is in our control to be able to look at this independently. You know what I mean? Like, okay, let's not have we don't trust the government, we don't trust the system, we don't trust healthcare. All right, well, let's independently test these variables. You get what I'm saying? And that's in our control. Psychologically, that's called agency. We have to create agency amongst each other. And when we see somebody like a Dr. Purnell, like a bishop, like a dentist, like a Dane, like myself, I hate when I'm sitting, okay, I reached the highest that you could reach in education as well. You know what I'm saying? This is the thing. I used to like it when I was younger when people would be like, you know what? You articulate so well. For what? I articulate so well for what? I can't, because I'm what I am. I can't talk in a way that can be understood by a scholar. You know, because what they're saying is you talk well for somebody that's from the hood.
Right. Can I add something to what you just said right there? Not only can you articulate well, and I need people to be able to get this, you can synthesize data, you can interpret data well. I'm telling you, that is what is excelled in Black intelligence.
Yes.
We can put science in front of 5 scientists, but when the Black scientist interprets the data, it's somehow not correct.
Exactly.
When Black science interprets the data, somebody is thinking for you.
Yes.
There's a white man behind you thinking your thoughts. That is internalized racism in and of itself.
Yes, absolutely.
The fact that me, a Black girl from East Orange, New Jersey, became a physician, nobody gifted that. I had to fight for that. I had to claw my way into that. I had to claw my way into Princeton and out of Princeton with honors. I had to claw my way into Duke Medical School and out of Duke Medical School with honors. I had to claw my way into Columbia and out of Columbia with honors. I had to claw my way into Johns Hopkins and out of Johns Hopkins with honors. I had to claw my way into passing all of my certifying exams and getting a board certification and becoming a fellow and out of that. I had to claw my way into the present job I'm in right now. And I need my people to understand that Black intelligence is real.
Absolutely. And as a sister, I salute you for that, because not only are you dealing with being a sister, you know, or being a female woman, you're a Black woman. You know what I'm saying? Which, you know, that's that glass ceiling is a whole different conversation. You know what I mean? But as a person, you know, as a Black person myself, I get it. You know what I'm saying? But this is the thing of how we have to change the perception of this.
Well, this is
even in psychology, the taboo of that.
well,
it all works together.
This goes to a point that I've been thinking about, because I'm a thinking man, and I always think about what the enemy's plan could be and what would be clever of the enemy to do. And when I see everyone saying the same thing, I think that's programming, because usually a secret is something that not everybody knows. But for some reason, for certain situation, information is pushed so that everyone is saying the same thing. So if I was a white supremacist or someone that was trying to destroy the Black culture, about something that would get everybody sick, but it would really make Black people sick, put out misinformation so that when there is a cure for it, or at least something that can help it, that nobody Black would take it. So I look at this information and how it's been accessible.
That's called crack.
Well,
that's exactly what they did with crack.
Well, what I'm saying is,
I hear you. That's disinformation. That is what's happening.
Right. So what I'm saying is, it seems like it's the disinformation has been programmed for us not to take something that everyone else will, even though it kills us. And yeah, if someone Black tells us that is, you know, something interesting or something that's educational, that because they're Black, it might not be the truth, or that someone white is programming them to do that. We are programmed to think that, and that's the deprogramming that's going on currently by what we're doing. Everyone on the Zoom.
I even think like with Dennis, you know, with the teachers, I love so much what the OSG does, because it starts in those classrooms. This attitude that we're talking about trusting each other and looking at each other as kings and queens and not niggas and bitches all the time, and all these things, like, that starts with them. You know what I mean? And this is why this Zoom is so important, because we have every aspect of change, you know, from the clinical, medical, to in the school rooms, to the business, to the faith. Like,
no, you hit the nail on the head, right? Because I tell people all the time, it was my Black household, my Black family, and my very early learning in a Black school system where I learned awareness and appreciation for my values. So that when I went into environments where I was one of the numerical minorities, I would not question whether or not I could achieve it, because I had already been taught that Black was beautiful, Black was strong, Black was excellent, Black was intelligent. And we have to, as a people in a community, begin to really understand the trauma we've internalized. And when I say the trauma that we have internalized, it's we perpetuate some of the same myths that white supremacy has taught and perpetuated through systems, through forces outside of our community. And I get people's fears. If you listen to me across all of the events that I've done in media, I get it. I get your fears. I get your concerns. I told you I've had security called on me in a hospital for asking too many questions. I've had a nurse call security and say, you're threatening. I had a doctor walk into an emergency room after my mother fell out of a chair and say there's nothing wrong with her, send her back to where she came from, and my mother had a splenic artery aneurysm, a ticking time bomb in her belly that began to leak blood, and she almost died from it. So not only do I have a lived experience, I have an intellectual experience. And the asset and the value that I serve in this conversation is that I can combine the two. I can say, how do you call a spade a spade? So when I got enrolled in this in the coronavirus vaccine trial, it was very much to see the process, right? I told you I did my homework. I looked at what the research was published to date, and that's, again, I want to keep emphasizing, even if I'm not the scientist in the lab, I can be the scientist who interprets the data, right? And so I looked at the data that was available to date, that was phase 1, that had been published. The study team had to tell you what was known about what was going on in phase 2, had about 600 people in phase 2. It was voluntary. I could withdraw at any time, right? And that had to be, I asked all those questions because those were the fears and concerns that my people had. And then I wanted to be able to translate that, to digest that, to decode that, to say this is what it's like to be a part of a clinical research trial. Bishop described to you, my father lived because of scientific advances. My father would have died years sooner than what he did had he not trusted in science.
Magic Johnson's too.
Right. We have HIV is not the death sentence it once was. HIV is a chronic condition that you have to stay on medication for. Now what I want people to pay attention to, and let me flip the script on all of you out there, conspiracy theorists. I'm gonna give you some energy to direct yourself. We need to be asking the question the same way that we solved coronavirus and were able to come up with a vaccine. Why are we not using those assets and those resources to find answers to other conditions like sickle cell disease? Right? Because when you put concerted effort, when you say, I want to put the full weight and power of the federal government, that's what the federal government did. It put money into the process. It didn't change the science, it put money into the process so that the science could happen without financial risk. And we need to be able, what equity and what justice calls for, is for us to be able to say, if you did this for that, what are you going to do for sickle cell? If you did this for that, what are you going to do to solve the food deserts, the pharmacy deserts, the quality education deserts, the access to livable wage deserts in my neighborhood? What can we do collectively, and what can powers and systems do to achieve different outcomes? That's what I want people to pay attention to. That's what I want you to open up your eyes to. That's agency, Taj, right? Information is power. That's agency. If you begin to understand how this process really worked, then you can say, how can we manipulate the levers of government or the levers of public institutions, the levers of science to achieve greater outcomes? There are possibilities out there for us if we're willing to step up into it. Now, there are some barriers that are trying to prevent us from operating in those possibilities, but I believe in our power, our resilience, I believe in our gifting, and I believe in our ability to play heroic roles. We are living in a new America, whether or not you're calling a new America. because of the outsized roles of black voters. Black voters saved the republic. Black voters in Georgia, black voters in Philadelphia, black voters in Wisconsin, black voters in Illinois, black voters all across this nation saved this republic. Black people showed up and voted, and we were able to change administrations. Otherwise, we would have been subject to laws and policies and systems that are keeping masses down and dead. And so if we have power that way, there are other ways we have power. We have power to introduce bills. We have powers to dissect the science. We have powers to stand up and to demand accountability. And that's not going to happen overnight. Just like this decision journey is fluid. It's fluid. Bishop and I have experienced something, and I've said this before, and I have to say it again for those of you who don't know what it's like. The pandemic landed on us. It didn't just land in a city, it landed on us. My father is gone. It landed on us, right? And I've been on conversations or Zooms with people that said, "Oh, people who died is because they were weaker." What? That is a survival of the fittest mentality. I've been on conversations with Zoom, and a lot of these are bots, these are talking points, and these are conspiracy theories that have said, "Oh, if you're not old, if you don't have health conditions, you're not going to die." We know that's not true. We've seen young people die from this disease. I've been on conversations with people saying, "Oh, but those people are going to die anyway." How do you say that? How do you devalue and dehumanize your life that way? And I need all of us to understand what's at stake. That's why I want people to understand what's at stake with the wait and see. There are a considerable amount of people, even in healthcare, we're talking about this. There are a considerable amount of providers who are on the fence. Some of our nurses, some of our other clinical providers, some of our frontline employees and staff, they're on the fence, right? And they're like, do I do this or do I while they're taking care of coronavirus patients? And it is these honest conversations, these transparent conversations where people have pulled me to the side and said, "Doc, it clicked for me. It clicked."
And also, I just want to emphasize this for a moment. My dad was a fighter. My dad had HIV. My dad was out there taking all the new stuff. But in August of 2019, my dad found out he had cancer all over his body.
Yeah. So
when my dad found out he had cancer all over his body, they were debating whether or not to give him chemo. But my dad, infectious disease doctor, said, "This man has beat everything. Give him chemo." So my dad, he took the chemo. The chemo took him off his baseline. In November, he had an aneurysm in his lung that blew up. He's coughing up blood all over. He said, "I'm going to die." I'm like, "Not going to die on my watch." I take him in. My dad had to incubate him. My dad, when he had coronavirus, my dad was walking again. My dad was going to the bathroom by himself again. My dad was no longer taking chemo. My dad was feeding himself 2 days before he died. I cooked him a steak. So the thing is, my dad beat everything. And, HIV, cancer, he had no lungs, you name it. My dad, he took an experiment to give him a valve for his lung. And that was in 2007. I worked at the University of Virginia. What I need you to understand is when you have a fighter like this, and then we lose him to something new, it hurts, And I was reading the things people say, "You didn't take the flu shot, the vaccine." I don't know. I'm just being honest. I don't know. And Doc, you can correct me. I don't know anybody who died of the flu.
not at the same rate as they died.
And the thing is that, hey, I was born in 1966. I took vitamins. I was tempted with steroids, but never took steroids. But in everything that I did my research. I've always done my research, and so forth and so on. And I believe each person, you can't go by someone else's word. You have to do your research. But when you have personal, I'm faith-based. Faith-based means that I'm in what I'm in based on personal testimonies. You either believe or you don't. But when you hear someone's personal testimony, you make the decision. You make a choice. And my dad would have taken the vaccine.
Yes.
So
Well, Dr. Chris and Bishop, can I jump in real quick? So, Bishop, I think one of the most important questions here is, again, why not? Why not take the flu vaccine, not take the flu shot, but then take the vaccine? That's what most people are struggling with, because even
He
myself.
just answered it. Can I just? I really need to harp on this. He just answered it.
Yeah.
Because the risk is different, Dennis. The risk is astronomically different. The risk of being infected with coronavirus and dying from coronavirus. I did a presentation on live. I don't know if I could share my screen, I could show it to everybody to show you how many people have died from the flu over the past, I think the data went back for maybe the past 5 or 7 years.
Hey, Nicolette.
There isn't a comparison. A lot of people don't get the flu shot because they don't see an urgency around it. I work in a hospital, right? So I know I gotta get the flu shot. Like if I get exposed to it, it takes me out of commission. I can't do my job if I'm frontline.
Question for some of us. Now, don't they give you a little bit of the flu when they give you the
No,
shot?
they don't, and I'm glad you
All right.
said that. They don't,
Okay.
because listen, and this is a very good question because it's the same thing. Vaccines can be a viral vector vaccine, meaning that you have a virus, right? You inject the virus. Either the virus itself generates an immune response, or the virus is a vector for something else you want to carry in, like a protein. Okay. What the flu vaccine is an attenuated virus. So it takes the flu virus and it changes it. It weakens it so that it can't infect you. But the vaccine is reactogenic. You heard me describe coronavirus the same way. Reactogenic vaccines mean they cause side effects. Every vaccine doesn't cause side effects, only reactogenic ones. Meaning you feel a headache, meaning you feel congestion, meaning you feel soreness. You feel the same symptoms you think is inflammatory process. It means your immune system is working. So that's what happens when you take the flu vaccine, and the same or similar process happens when you take the corona mRNA vaccines, because they're both reactogenic. But the key point that I want to make, Dennis, is people are not dying at the same rate or in the same numbers from flu as coronavirus. So personally, people perceive risk differently, right? If I don't see a lot of people impacted by the flu, or if I don't see people dying from the flu, I probably think I'll be okay not getting the flu vaccine, okay? But if I see, and I don't think people realize this, 400,000 Americans are dead. The first laboratory confirmed diagnosis of coronavirus happened on January 20th, 2020. Today is January 21, 2021. And from January 20th, 2020 to January 20th, 2021, over 400,000 people are dead. That's never happened for the flu. Unless you want to talk about the great pandemic of 1918, which is a different thing. That has not happened. We are approaching numbers of heart disease. We are approaching numbers of cancer. It is projected that by February 17th, another 100,000 people will be dead. That's why if you have tools, I need people to understand this. If you tell me I'm not ready to take the vaccine, I want you to know the risk you're taking on. And I want educators to know the same risk that tells you I don't want to go into the school, you must understand that that risk and more exists in your house. You must understand that you might not put yourself in a school building, but if you put yourself in a home and you let in other people in your home who don't live there, you have taken on a very large risk. And I want to make sure people understand that, because lives are at stake. Now, if you tell me, look, Doc, I'm comfortable taking on that risk, that's your autonomy. That's you operating in your choice. But I need to make sure, because I love my people and I love my community, I need to make sure that you fully understand what you're doing. I need to make sure. And I can't trust that somebody else will communicate that to you clearly. I need to make sure you understand what you're doing, so you know the risk that you're taking, and that the risk is higher for you as a black person than the risk is for a white person.
Being born in 1966, growing up, what we heard every night was the death count in Vietnam. We heard the death count all the way up to 1973. And I remember when people go to cookouts and, drink and have a good time, we were upset at how many blacks were dying and losing their life in Vietnam over something that would never make us free. But more people have died from coronavirus all the years in Vietnam. Every night we heard the death count. We found out how many died. And within our communities, and even the soldiers, the black and Latino soldiers came back broke and hurt. They grew up in our community. We remember that. So the coronavirus, and me being in the military, I have to always compare that risk with the military. So that means you have people who died in 1 year, then died in all the years of World War II. That's devastating. But yet, we will honor those who died in war. But in coronavirus, right now we're belittling. And that's wrong. That's wrong, and that has to change.
Can I show, Mr. Dash, can I share my screen and show that one slide about flu?
She should be able to share.
Yeah, you should be able to share now.
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. How many Americans die from the flu each year? Okay. So this is looking at the 2012 to 2013 season to the 2019 to 2020 season. This is how many Americans died. From 2012 to 2013, 43,000. From 2013 to 2014, 38,000. From 2014 to 2015, 51,000. From 2015 to 2016, 23,000. From 2016 to 2017, 38,000. From 2017 to 2018, 61,000. From 2018 to 2019, 34,000. From the 2019 to 2020 season, 22,000. From January 20th, 2020 to January 20th, 2021, 400,000 Americans have died. We're not dealing with a similar level of crisis. There are certain groups who are at risk for the death from flu, the very elderly and the very young. But because we're not dealing with the same level of crisis, people don't get the flu shot. But in the hospital, you have to get the flu shot to get to work, right? It's mandatory. These vaccines aren't mandatory, and they won't be mandatory for a while because they don't have what we call full or primary approval. They have emergency use authorization approval, and they have emergency use authorization approval because the alarming rate that people are dying at, we have a 9/11 happening every day. Every day. And we have become numb to that level of death. I saw my sister struggle with coronavirus. My sister's a breast cancer survivor. And it took my sister about 9 to 10 months to get some level of normalcy back in her life, to get back to her baseline, to get off of supplemental oxygen, to not have tachycardia, to not have shortness of breath. This is an unprecedented public health crisis, and so we need the tools, we need the weapons to meet the crisis. And one of those tools is the vaccine. And like I told you all, there are going to be multiple examples because scientists are working with a sense of urgency to find solutions because these are all considered avoidable deaths. We could have prevented these deaths. right? And so
Definitely.
Johnson
As soon as I finish the
you're
Zoom,
probably
I'm gonna call you
gonna
right
go
back.
next. And Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is different from the two mRNA vaccines that are out, because Johnson & Johnson's vaccine, they tested just one dose, right? So you have one dose versus two doses. So people are going to have options, right? And the more options people have, you're going to be able to say, you know, maybe I don't want this vaccine because I need two doses of it, or maybe I want to choose this one. Some of them are going to be more prevalent in a global scenario because they're more economical, or they're more cost effective to produce. So you can have the vaccine available to sheer magnitudes greater than something that is more expensive, because two doses or something is more expensive because of the technology used to make it. So I think it's very important that you have all of that information, so that when you're trying to make your decision, that you're not making your decision out of a false sense of security. We got to be real, whether we're educators, physicians, bishops, psychologists, you know, moguls. We just have to be real. I mean, David, you have type 1 diabetes. You know what you have to do to stay alive. Mm-hmm. You know that.
All day, every day, 24/7.
24/7. You can't sleep on that. It's not the man that's trying to manipulate you. You have type 1 diabetes. Mm-hmm. You know what you have to do to stay alive.
Yeah.
Right? Down to the minutia. I don't know if people understand what it's like to live with type 1 diabetes.
You can't know what it's like unless you have it.
Right.
But it's testing your blood all day, it's taking shots all day, and you know, it's a 24/7, it's a lifestyle, you know.
Right. He can't escape type 1 diabetes, basically is what he's telling me. Every waking and sleeping moment.
And I have to go to the doctor to get my prescription to keep me alive, like gas. The insulin is like gas for me. Without it, I can't move. You know.
And you having that and being able to speak about that before the masses also helps to demystify, or help people to understand. Okay, you can have a safe relationship with medications, because that's the only way you live by. Medications is the only way my father lived. I told you all that I have an autoimmune deficiency, autoimmune vitamin B12 deficiency. I don't have certain receptors in my gut. I didn't discover it until I was an adult. If I don't take injections of vitamin B12, I can't live.
Well, I think had I not been in a situation where I'm dependent on doctors and medicine, I may have a different position.
Right.
But again, the fact is I've had to actually trust medicine to live. I don't have a choice. So I'm just rocking with that. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm rocking with.
And I just wanted to use that example for people, because that's what we're facing with coronavirus. We need tools to help us keep people alive. In the same way that Dane needs tools to keep him alive for his type 1 diabetes, the same way I need tools to keep me alive, the same way my father needed tools to keep him alive, we need tools. We need tools to keep us alive. And so, you know, tonight, I believe, is a part of a dialogue that has to continue to happen. And I've been doing these dialogues across the country. I mean, whether it's Atlanta, New Mexico, New York, New Jersey, whether it's Canada, whether it's the BBC, whether it's parts of Africa, I'm willing to have this dialogue because I know what's at stake. I've seen it every day. I've seen it in our hospital. I've seen it in my family. I know what's at stake. And I don't want to use fear to manipulate people, but I don't want you to be found sleeping. I don't want you to say that something isn't real that is, when I very well know it's real. I mean, at one point, and I can't talk about the specifics of my job, but at one point we had so many dead bodies we didn't have any place to put them.
Yeah.
We were driving up morgues, trucks, to put dead bodies in. I don't want to ever see that again. I don't know if you all know what that's like. I don't want to see that again. At one point, we had people dying in the city of New York at home, whether from coronavirus or not, just because they were afraid to come to the hospital, or our whole systems were paralyzed. I don't want to see that again. This is a war. And there are ways that wars have to be waged. And so this is one of the tools of this warfare. It's a vaccine. And we will continue to share this information. The stat I wanted to quote before, I looked it up to confirm it. 9 Americans have died every 5 minutes. Think about it that way. We've been on this Zoom since 7:30. Every 5 minutes, 9 Americans have died.
So, I think it's important, like you said, that, this information is distributed by people like us. And when I say people like us, I'm really, really proud to be a part of the commission because everyone is a professional at what they do. But the difference between y'all and everyone else is you're unapologetic about who you are. You don't fit that norm. Doctor. One of the reasons probably why it's hard for people to accept that you're a doctor is not only because you're black and you're a woman, but because you're so unapologetic about your blackness. Just like Taj as a therapist, a lot of people, it's hard to accept him as a therapist because he's so unapologetic. And he's not a dark-skinned guy, but about his blackness because he's very black and he's Spanish.
Get that doctor role in a quick split second.
I know, you're about to be there, right?
Right there.
You were like, yeah, last time I spoke to you.
Yeah, they real mad.
And congratulations. And then even with the bishop, it's hard to hear what he has to say for some people and for people to accept him as a bishop because he's unapologetic about who he is and where he's from, his culture and the history of it. And the same thing with Dennis, which was why I was immediately thought that the OSG movement was so important because I'd never seen principles so black. I've seen black principles, but they're so not black acting without the mustache and all that I don't even look at them as black. But everyone on here, I look at as from our culture, truthfully, unapologetically, but still professionals at what they do. And that's why I value what y'all tell me because I know you're going to tell me the truth. And then I know you're going to tell the culture the truth. So again, my agenda for this Zoom was not to tell people what to do, but for them to have the information that they usually don't before they make the decision. So they can't say, oh, I thought, now you know. And for me, consciousness makes you responsible. Once you know, you're going to get hit a little harder because you should have known better. And you had that option. Having knowledge is giving an option. And we give that option in a way that there's no excuse not to understand. And hopefully, like the doctor was saying, or rather the bishop, you have to have people you trust based on experience and your time with them. And I know that my time with y'all, I trust y'all, and I hope that everyone that's watching your time with me, you know that consciously I'm only going to tell you what I think is in the best interest of the culture, the truth. And that was this. So thank you, Dr. Chris. Thank you, Taj, soon to be doctor. I can't wait to call you Dr. Taj. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bishop Purnell. Thank the whole commission, those that weren't able to be here because you was out being a superhero someplace else. And I appreciate everyone for having the dialogue. People on the live, some people I thought were saying some silly things, but it just proves how programmed we are to fight and not believe in each other, to think white ice is colder. It's a program. But if you're conscious, then be strong enough to beat it. Beat the program, and it doesn't mean that it's not as legit if it comes from us. It may mean it's more legit. So thank you. I'm definitely going to cut, I want this to be seen over and over again. I think it's important. And Dr. Chris, anything I can do to help you bring awareness to the truth, I'm here.
Get that video when you get that vaccine. I need that video.
Oh, I'm telling you, as soon as I get it, not only going to get the video, I might hand deliver it now. You know what I mean? Because I can come back outside. I'm a person that I feel like I need to be outside. I got some things I want to do. Only when I want to launch the things I'm doing that I'm doing inside. But I don't want to go outside, come back home, get somebody sick, or end up on a hospital bed like, give me whatever you got, and I can't believe I didn't listen. I should have listened. I don't want to do that one, and I'm not. So thank you, and I appreciate it. And I'll probably see you on TV tomorrow or something like that. And keep up the good fight. I love all of y'all. Thank you.
Y'all are blessed. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
All right, fam. Take care.
All right, Dennis. All right, Bishop.
All right, homie.
All right, Taj. You know, I was on the Zoom all day, by the way. I just heard what y'all was talking about. I was like, I don't think I can get involved in the budgets. You know what I'm saying? That was a real principled conversation. I'm not even getting in that one.
Yeah, that one was
You know,
yeah, that one was.
what you moved on with the governor is taking place. She got a phone call today. So what you moved on is taking place with Governor Cuomo. Good job.
Oh, she got the call from Cuomo.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought she got it from Jersey. I thought, okay, good money, good money.
Cuomo. That's you, man. Remember?
Good money, good money.
God bless. Take care.
If you want another amazing video with the one and only Dame Dash, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.